We are now moving to our next session, which addresses dietary diabetes. I request the moderator, Dr. Om Lakshmi, to please come on stage. There was a small error on my part. Dr. Om Lakhani to please come on stage. Also, Dr. Pratibha Phadke, Dr. Tejas Limaye, Dr. Sarita Kulkarni to chair the session.
Important role in the prevention as well as management of diabetes. So for this interesting debate on various diets and diabetes, I invite Dr. Neeta Deshpande and Dr. Rucha Mehta on stage. Over to you, ma'am.
A very good afternoon to all of you. So I'm back here after a year for a very similar kind of a talk, and that is on diets, a passion of mine. The topic that has been given to me today is vegan versus vegetarian diet, a critical look. So I'm going to take you through some of the terminology. This is going to be the flow of my talk. I do not have any disclosures. What's the terminology? What exactly do we mean by vegan? Loosely, we know what it means, but let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. What do they exactly eat? That is the main thing that we want to know. And what does the research so far say about going vegan or going vegetarian vis-a-vis being an omnivore? And can we really draw any conclusions at this point of time? That's what I'm going to take you through. So basically, looking at the terminology, this is what vegetarians are. They do not eat meat, including poultry or fish, but they do eat animal products such as eggs, cheese, and honey. And even amongst the vegetarians, you have so many classifications. You have lacto-ovo, you have lacto, you have just ovo, and you have something called pescatarian. That is, in some communities, seafood is considered like vegetarian. So they eat seafood and they don't eat anything else. So these are the various variations. So you can imagine how difficult research will be if you have to differentiate between so many different kinds of vegetarians. That is one. Second is the vegans. So these are the two main classifications that I'm going to talk about today. Vegans are people who eat no animal products at all, which means no eggs, no dairy, nothing that uses any part of an animal. And I love this one, and that's what we all Indians are. And this is a term, this is not a made up term. This is a term, and that is flexitarians, where you say, I eat non-veg. But when is that? That may be like once a week, once in 15 days, actually twice, because you eat the leftovers on the next day. So it's for 2 days at a time. So those are flexitarians, people who eat non-vegetarian, but not on a daily basis for all practical purposes. And for research purposes, these people would be considered as vegetarians because the major part of all their food comes from vegetarian sources. So basically we moved, I mean, if you had to actually go for the gradations, you have omnivores, the pictures are self-explanatory. Then you have pesco-vegetarians, where only seafood is allowed. And then you have ovo-lacto. And then you have this very, very pure form of vegetarianism, which is the vegan. So vegan is the strictest, most pure form, you can say, of vegetarianism. And this is what it is. So basically, to tease it down further, vegetarians do not eat the products or byproducts of animal slaughter. So if an animal is not slaughtered, the byproducts can be had for vegetarians. So basically, you will find that vegetarians do not consume any meat at all, any stock or fats that derive from animal slaughter. However, they do take byproducts of animals that does not involve animal slaughter, such as eggs, dairy products, honey, for example. All these, even honey is a byproduct of a living thing. So this is the difference between vegetarians and vegans. And this came in Bloomberg some time back, and this created a furor. I'm coming down to India now. All those definitions are global definitions. What I'm coming down to is this Bloomberg article which said most Indians are non-vegetarian, men more than women, and South and East the most. And if you go through the statistics, you will find that across the board in India, there are only 30% who are like pure vegetarians, and the rest of them, 70%, are said to eat non-veg at some time or the other. It may not be every day, but that's what it is. And in a country that is 80% Hindu, let me make it very clear here, I am completely apolitical, and all my thoughts and talk here is completely non-religious. But in a country that is 80% Hindu, if you find that 70% actually eat non-vegetarian, so we are touted as a country that is largely vegetarian, which may not be completely true. That's what I want to say. And this created a furor. This came from the Ministry of Health, from the government side, where they clubbed all non-vegetarian food with junk food for obesity and bad nutrition. So this is what came out from the Ministry of Health. And only plant-based food was considered to be healthy, as you can see in this particular image that I have shown you. So when did the word vegan come? It came in 1944, long time back, to describe someone who fully abstains from all animal products for ethical reasons. Okay? So what do vegans do? Vegans strictly avoid consuming any food or beverages that contain any meat at all, not even honey, not even rennet or gelatin, and no stocks or anything like that. And they extend it further. Some of the very strict vegans who do it for ethical purposes, they extend it to other parts of their life other than eating. Like they will not use any leather or silk or wool because animals are involved in that particular thing. This is what vegans are. Now, why would someone do this? Why is someone vegetarian? Or why is someone vegan? The reasons are several. There may be one or more in a person. Some people may believe in the health benefits of it. Some people are very much worried about the environment, okay? So that's another reason. Some, because they are animal rights activists, that may be. Then there could be religious reasons. This is major in India. The religious reason is major in India. And lastly, the high cost of a meat-based diet. I think this is mostly the flexitarians, where the high cost may forbid them to eat it on a daily basis. So these are some of the reasons why someone would become vegetarian or vegan. Now coming to the evidence. What evidence do we have for vegetarianism or veganism? Now let me tell you here that most of the data, or almost all of the data, that tells you good or bad about vegetarianism or veganism comes from the West. And their idea of vegetarianism is quite different from ours. What we eat as vegetarians could be quite different from what they eat. So you cannot exactly extrapolate all of the data that tells you about vegetarianism, the data that comes from the West. You cannot extrapolate all of it to us. But let me tease it out as much as possible. So here you have something about veganism, and I have included only the data that has come in very, very recently. So this is 2020 data, which tells you about veganism, aging, and longevity. Okay? So there are epidemiological studies which consistently show, this is a review article which tells you that veganism is associated with lower disease rates, mostly lower incidence of cancer and cardiovascular disease. However, though the disease rates are less, Mortality rates are almost the same. Veganism improves insulin resistance and dyslipidemia. I'm going to tell you a little about this later on, because the only difference, basic difference, practical difference between veganism and vegetarianism is dairy products. So that's the only major difference. I'm going to dwell a little on dairy products. And the reason you feel that veganism improves insulin resistance, I will show you a little later, is that milk products, okay, cow's milk especially, can increase the insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1. So when IGF-1 increases, it can increase insulin resistance, it can cause dyslipidemia, and it can also cause a little bit of obesity because it increases the levels of what is called as mTOR. So mTOR is involved in obesity. So when in veganism, you're getting rid of dairy products, and that's why probably you have an improved insulin resistance and improvement in dyslipidemia. Now this point, gut microbiota, is supposed to be the main reason why veganism has got all its attributes or its benefits. They're all attributable to the diversity of the gut microbiota that ensues when you take up veganism. So that is what it is. So vegan diets do not fulfill the requirements of children, pregnant women, or old individuals who should receive adequate supplements. I have put huge question marks before that. The question marks because when I'm going to show you some data about dairy, I'm going to show you there that maybe dairy is not absolutely essential even for children and in the growing years. That's why I put the question marks. What about the long-term health of vegetarians and vegans? We worry about that. What happens if they don't eat any meat at all? What happens if there are no milk products at all? Most of the findings are from large cross-sectional and prospective cohort studies in Western countries with a high proportion, and in that cohort, many vegetarians. So what did they find? They find a lower prevalence of overweight and obesity and a lower risk of IHD. Contrast this to our population, where even with high carbohydrates and less meat, we still have increasing rates of obesity. That's why I said you cannot exactly extrapolate. The data are equivocal for stroke. Some evidence, now this is seen across the board, some evidence that the risk for all cancer sites combined is slightly lower in vegetarians than in non-vegetarians, lower risks for diabetes, and overall, but the overall mortality is similar. That all the studies say the same thing, that overall mortality is not affected. And despite the ills of veganism and vegetarianism, and despite some risks that have been mentioned, the long-term health of these people is supposed to be generally good. Now, dietary intakes and cardiovascular health of healthy adults. So I'm going to quickly go through some evidence which shows you, because I'm running out of time, the conclusion in this particular study that looked at short-term, medium-term, and long-term plant-based lifestyle. They found that it is associated with favorable dietary intake, safety markers, and CV risk factor profile in this study which came out in December 2019. What about multiple health outcomes? This is a review of 86 cross-sectional and prospective studies, and you find reduced BMI, lipids, and glucose levels in vegetarians and vegans. And in prospective cohort studies also, you find that there's a reduction in risk of cancer, not of total CV and cardiovascular, cerebrovascular disease, etc. So the conclusion is that there is a significant protective effect of a vegetarian diet for the incidence and or mortality from ischemic heart disease and incidence from total cancer. So we do have some evidence, and on top of that, the vegan diet conferred a significant reduced risk of incidence from total cancer. Now this is, we are worried about the vitamin B12, so the biomarker. So this is one study. Now if any of you are interested, there was a seminal big study in a group called the Adventists who do not eat, who are vegetarians, and they are in the US mostly, and this study came out in 2013. So many of the sub-studies which have come out about vegetarianism and veganism are sub-studies from this population of Adventists. And this is one such sub-study which talks about B12, and it concluded that the prevalence of B12 intake less than 2 micrograms per day was 15.2% in vegans, 10.6 in lacto-ovo, and 6.5 in non-vegetarians. So there is some degree of B12 deficiency that could occur in pure vegans and to a certain extent in vegetarians also. Now, the multiple health benefits and minimal risks associated with vegetarian diets, this is an excellent review, and what it says is that the Adventist Health Study took place in 2013, but compared to that, the more recent studies on vegetarianism have demonstrated significant but smaller risk reductions for mortality in CV disease, cerebrovascular disease, diabetes, and chronic kidney disease, and the vegetarian health risks of deficiencies of protein, omega-3, etc., they are there, but they can be supplemented. Last but not the least, in the last 1 minute or 2 minutes of my talk, I am going to talk to you about dairy. Does dairy deserve its health halo? That means milk and milk products. Is it a hype or is it a reality? Now, what I must tell you here is that the current US dietary guidelines recommend that just about everyone eat 3 servings of dairy per day, amounting to 240 ml per day. Do we really require that much? And unfortunately, like many US dietary guidelines, let me be very candid out here, many of the US dietary guidelines, including this one, are based on very inadequate data. This particular 3 servings per day and 240 ml is based on a small study of just 155 participants. And do you know on what it is based? It is based only on one thing, and that is the fracture risk in adulthood. That's all. Just for fractures, nothing else. And based on only 155 patients. So do we really want to look at that? This, I urge you all again to go through this. This is February 2020. This is about everything that you wanted to know about milk and health. This has appeared in the NEJM. And I'm just going to take, can I take 1 more minute? Yeah. To tell you about dairy, what it says is that the recommended intake, I told you, is 240 ml. And this has been justified to meet nutritional requirements only for risk of bone fractures. And the health benefit has not been established. The other things have not been established. Again, this is from the same paper. To increase milk production, cows have been bred to produce increased IGF-1, and they are pregnant for most of the time that they are milked. So if they are pregnant for most of the time that they are milked, it greatly increases the levels of progestin, estrogens, and other hormones. So what is going to happen to the remaining health of the person? You are only looking at the fracture risk. So normal growth and development can be obtained throughout childhood without dairy products if attention is given to diet quality, including use of supplemental B12 that includes few animal products and vitamin D. Body weight, what happens? It is we don't know. Body weight, some studies say this way, some studies say that way, so that we don't know. What about blood pressure, lipids, and CVD? For persons living in low-income areas where milk can provide some wholesome food, yes. But if your diet is very good in all other aspects, milk is not a must to prevent blood hypertension, lipids, and CVD problems. So all these nutrients in milk can be obtained from other sources. For adults, overall evidence does not support high dairy for reduction of fractures, which was the primary justification of the US recommendations. Total dairy consumption not clearly related to weight control, but high consumption of dairy foods is likely to increase the risk of prostate cancer and possibly endometrial cancer. So, to summarize, if diet quality is low, especially for children in low-income environments, dairy foods can improve nutrition, whereas if diet quality is high, that includes urban Indians, increased intake is unlikely to provide substantial benefits, and instead harms are possible because of the source of the milk that we have today. Conclude, the exact mechanisms of health promotion by vegan diets are still not entirely clear, but most likely multifactorial. Well-planned vegan diets and their associated components affect both bacterial composition and gut microbiota. Although the vegan diet may be inadequate in calorific value, it is rich in dietary fiber, polyphenols, and antioxidant vitamins. So I will conclude here, and I think I can take any questions in the later on. Yeah. Thank you very much.